Simmer down now! Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great show tonight. We are headed back to World War I to discuss the famous anti-war movement. Tonight we have the author of The Illusion of Victory on the show tonight, Thomas Fleming. He's 85 years old, ladies and gentlemen, and probably one of America's greatest historians. Alright, let's get to it. Okay, so what I personally know is that World War I started in July of 1914. Archduke Ferdinand and his wife Sophie of Austria-Hungary were assassinated by Serbian terrorists. This sparked Attila the Hun, or Germany, to declare war on Serbia on July 28th. Germany supposedly pledged their loyalty to Austria-Hungary, and within 5 days of July 28th, August 3rd, Germany had invaded France and Russia, which started Double Front War. The war continued on, and we claimed to maintain a neutral state, although we shipped several hundreds of weapons to several European countries and gave out bank loans to these countries to buy these weapons. We used the war to basically gain economic power. Moving on, let us keep in mind that Woodrow Wilson had promised to keep the United States out of war with his re-election campaign slogan. He kept us out of war, ladies and gentlemen. In April of 1917, Woodrow was granted permission by Congress to enter the war due to Germans coaxing Mexico to attack the United States. Against Woodward's decision were the socialists, labor workers, anarchists, and anti-war protesters. Among these great socialists was Eugene Debs, the Socialist Party leader. Debs and the rest of the party believed the underlying cause of the war was greed of European countries who wanted market power. The socialists basically saw the war as an unethical, unemployment-boosting, unnecessary conflict. Exactly 1 year after the Espionage Act was passed, June 6, 1918, Eugene Debs delivered his famous anti-war speech in Canton, Ohio, and was arrested under the Espionage Act. The Espionage Act, enacted by Congress shortly after declaring war on Germany, basically because they were all sissies and the anti-war activists were right. The end. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimate tank and submarine cleaner for your everyday war needs. Just take one wipe or one dollop and clean the outer layer of your submarine or tank with it. Also available in Canon styles. Available in the U.S. with a proper bank loan only. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Basically, as we were saying, Congress enacted the Espionage Act, which basically allowed federal agents to arrest anyone who threatened national security. Eugene Debs was arrested because he was supposedly a threat to national security. Right. In his speech, Debs said, I quote, I realize that in speaking to you this afternoon, there are certain limitations placed on the right of free speech. I must be exceedingly careful, prudent as to what I say, and even more careful and prudent as to how I say it. I may not be able to say all I think, but I am not going to say anything that I do not think. I would rather 1,000 times be a free soul in jail than to be a sycophant and coward in the streets. And that he was, ladies and gentlemen, because Debs was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, while in prison, he ran for president and received 6% of the votes, which is over 1 million votes, ladies and gentlemen. Eugene Debs' arrest was very similar to other arrests under the Espionage and Sedition Acts, which were appealed to the Supreme Court. Congress realized the vagueness of the Espionage Act, probably because they did it to save their own butts. So they enacted the Sedition Act, which eliminated the vagueness of the Espionage Act and basically stated again that any person that threatened national security would face severe penalties. Charles Schenck was the epitome of Eugene Debs. After thousands of men were drafted for World War I, Schenck distributed hundreds of flyers voicing his socialist anti-war opinions. The flyers stated how the drafting of these men violated the 13th Amendment outlawing slavery. Schenck was, of course, arrested under the Espionage and Sedition Acts in 1919. His case was appealed to the Supreme Court, where Schenck claimed that the Espionage and Sedition Acts violated the First Amendment, which, of course, is the freedom of speech. And Schenck's point was completely valid. He was voicing his opinions through press, which he was rightfully entitled to do. Schenck's case is very similar to the recent Voting Rights Act case in the hands of the Supreme Court. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Justice Scalia of the early 1900s, ruled that the Espionage Act did not violate the First Amendment. However, Justice Holmes would completely contradict his statements in the later Supreme Court case of U.S. versus Abrams. A young group of anarchists, including Abrams, handed out pamphlets which criticized the decision of the U.S. to deploy troops into Russia. The Supreme Court voted 7-2 to uphold Abrams and the other men's sentences of 15 to 20 years. Now, shortly after the Supreme Court case of the U.S. versus Abrams, more anarchists and socialists rose to fight against the war and the government. Carlo Valdinacci, an Italian anarchist, blew up the front porch of Attorney General Mitchell Palmer. This was one of several anti-war anarchist attacks against U.S. politicians. An enraged Mitchell Palmer was to destroy these immigrant anarchist terrorists. Palmer gathered a team of specialized agents and began his arrests. In their biggest roundup, Palmer and his men arrested over 249 suspected terrorists under the Espionage and Sedition Acts. Almost all of these people were deported to their original homelands in Europe, and several faced major sentences. One of these people being Emma Goldman, who was a Russian immigrant in the U.S., a major anarchist of the time. If we think closely, the unpiloted drone situation of today is extremely similar to the Palmer raids. U.S. drones have been used to locate and kill terrorists throughout all of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Currently, it is being debated whether or not unpiloted drones should be used to kill suspected terrorists in the United States. So basically, Mitchell Palmer was the unpiloted drone of 1919. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, Thomas Fleming on the show. The hot potato hand grenade, guaranteed to kill any man in any trench, any day, within a 5-mile radius, depending on your throwing average. Thomas Fleming, ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Fleming!
Thank you.
You are quite the historian, sir. You've written about every topic in American history, from Ben Franklin to World War I to the war in Afghanistan.
Indeed, I have.
So you're 85 years old, extremely healthy, wise, you're just freaking awesome, huh?
You can say so.
So your book is all about how America was under the impression that we won the war because of the Treaty of Versailles, but we actually didn't.
You can say so.
Well, alrighty then. So what are you up to now? What book are you writing? How's things going?
Good.
Wait, don't tell me that. I have